And welcome to the Self-Aware Entrepreneur Show on this Wednesday hump day afternoon. Thank you for joining us, whether it's your dinner time, whether it's your breakfast, or whether it's the evening like it is out in Australia. And I know we always get a few Australian guests on, so good day to you guys. Today, joining me, I have the pleasure to introduce Su Winsbury. And Sue is a multi-passionate lady. She is really, my kind of person. She has a number of different aspects to her work, to her journey. She's really focused on how we manage our energy, especially looking at people who are suffering from chronic illness and taking the lessons that they've taken from their experience and helping people to understand that in a wider perspective. But she's also a well-being coach to a wide variety of clients. She is a specialist in chronic fatigue, and obviously with the challenges that people are having around long COVID at the minute, she is one of the predominant experts on how people are coming through that, managing that energy and managing those challenges. But more than anything, she's got a background in PR and marketing. She wanted to be a journalist. She's got an awful lot of different talents to bring, and more importantly, she's going to be bringing a lot of value to you today. So I want to introduce Sue, and thank you for joining me on the Self-Aware Entrepreneur Show.
Thank you, Lee. That sounds like a lot to live up to.
Well, there we go. And when you've done an awful lot and you've got a lot of different specialisms, it's the bio becomes quite long. But you know what? That is you in a nutshell, and everyone's going to get to explore that today. So, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're currently up to, Sue?
Yep. So as a bit of we were talking about being multi-passionate. As a bit of a multi-passionate, I have a few strings to my bow, but they all interweave together into our overall health and well-being. And for me, well-being is it's not just one thing. It's a combination of our mind, body, and our soul. We've got an energetic body, we've got our physical body, we've got our mental and emotional bodies. So I like to bring all of that together. I love doing deep energy work, so working on the subconscious, but also really, really passionate about our physical health, our physical well-being, and preventing burnout, which is far, far easier to do than the recovery process. So I work in recovery as well for people with chronic fatigue, long COVID. But if you can prevent it before you tip over that point, then it's much, much easier.
Yeah, and you kind of bring that balance and that fusion of some of the spiritual elements alongside some of the more traditional medicinal elements, and actually then kind of packaging that in a way that's looking at modern medicine, modern health conditions and how we can best manage those. But obviously, kind of directing into this field has been quite a journey in itself. So can you tell us a little bit more about ultimately your experiences with the challenges of burnout and how that's kind of brought you to do the work that you do today?
Yeah, so I had an interesting path when as you said, I used to work in PR and marketing, but it was like wearing the wrong pair of shoes every day. And I just thought I didn't really fit in. I couldn't quite work out what was, I loved writing and that creative side, but it was literally an uncomfortable pair of shoes. And I had a career break, found healing, and that set me onto a path of holistic therapies. And I sort of did all the normal holistic therapy trainings, qualifications, could do any number of things. And then this chronic fatigue recovery support training came along.
Yeah.
I was at a point where I didn't want to do any more courses. I didn't want to do any more training. I was just like, no, I'm not doing any more. But it just kept knocking on my door. Yeah. So in the end, I was just like, okay, so I'll listen to the messages I'm being given. And part of that training was to become a wellbeing coach and then specialise in chronic fatigue recovery. And then I've sort of added on more and more energy work since then, because it's very, very powerful. Working with the subconscious is super powerful at healing. And we've got so many layers to who we are that sometimes we can't get through those layers just through coaching or talking. And as everything has evolved, I always think that the universe has wonderful plans for us. And when my eldest was doing his A-levels, there were very definite signs of him burning out.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't known, if I hadn't had my training, if I didn't know what to look for, I wouldn't have spotted those signs at that time. So it was, I was obviously meant to do the training for a very obvious reason.
Yeah, and there's a real power to kind of either experiencing it personally or experiencing it with someone who's very dear to us. But I just want to take a step back even further, Sue, and ask, what were you like as a child, and how has that been brought forward into your life today?
So I was quite quiet. Mm-hmm. I was very, very conscientious.
Yeah.
I was the good girl. Didn't like getting told off. Fairly sensible till I got to my teens, but I was actually quite interested in energy work when I was in my teens.
Yeah.
I had a few wobbles around the age of 13, 14, sort of quite major wobbles, really.
I think we all do.
To the point that my parents moved house and made me move school at 14. So yeah, it was a wobble. It was an experience, but I was very much a child that didn't want attention, never put my hand up in class, just got on with things. And that was kind of something that stayed with me for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
Never wanting to contribute or put my hand up, or even in training events, I'd still be at the back hiding.
And what brought that transition? Because obviously nowadays you do business mentoring, you do spiritual therapies, but you also do quite a lot around that wellbeing coaching, both for individuals and some stuff with corporate organisations as well. And obviously there will have come a point where you transitioned from, quiet Sue at the back to louder Sue at the front. And what was that process? How did you go through that?
Interestingly, it was when I was doing my coaching training.
Yeah.
And I was facilitating at the sort of the next level of the training, and had to go to the I think we had about 25 people in the room, and I had to go to the front to introduce myself. And it was literally my name is Sue, this is my background. And I had heart palpitations. My brain had gone to absolute mush. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
And I was 30 seconds. That's all I had to speak for. And through my coaching and self-development and a lot of my own inner healing and my own work on myself and kind of unraveling who I was, and pushing myself out of my comfort zone. So I just started to try more and more things that were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
One of them was taking up pole dancing in my 40s.
That's a way to get uncomfortable quickly, right?
So everyone else in the class was sort of the same age as my children, and I did things like whitewater rafting and kayaking and fire walking and things that really pushed me out of that comfort zone, and I realized I could do them.
Yeah.
And they were all actually really fun, and they helped my personal growth massively.
Yeah, and I think that's something massive to take, because like you said, you'd always been, quite shy and retiring. But when you decided to take that step out and, almost be a little bit vulnerable to new experiences, and probably challenge some of those beliefs, you really, have found that actually I'm capable of so much. And I can just picture you like in that kayak, like smashing off some rocks, like,
there was a lot of that, I have to say.
Just a bit of fun. But yeah, it's so easy to kind of feel that, when we don't have a valuable voice, or that we should not really put ourselves out there into experiences that feel a little bit risky. But there's a massive part of growth that involves being a little bit uncomfortable. Not to the point where we panic and completely feel like we can't handle anything and everything feels like a threat, but just gradually taking that second question and standing by that door of fear that we so often stand behind, and just open it a little bit. And quite often our growth is on the other side of those doors, and totally. Just being able to open it up and just take a step through and just see. It might not be the fear door that you want to go through, but if you don't open it and take a step through, you'll never know what's on the other side. So obviously with your experience, in chronic fatigue, And very similar, autoimmune and, chronic conditions, you start to get a real understanding of how people manage their energy. People, who have medical conditions that cause underlying levels of fatigue and means that, the amount of charge that they have as a human being is probably less. Obviously, for myself, with my own autoimmune arthritis and my experience with that, know what it's like to have to manage my energy. And the attention I pay to that is significantly more, because I probably have, 70% of the charge I did 10 years ago before I was unwell. But what I really want to explore, Sue, is how you help people to be able to manage their energy and manage the condition more effectively.
So all of these conditions, when particularly looking at sort of chronic fatigue, burnout, it's a multifaceted condition. So it's not caused by any one particular thing. It's a layering of a multitude of things. Most people who burn out, who get chronic fatigue, ME, and I put fibromyalgia and long COVID kind of into the same part and parcel, tend to be very high A-type personalities. So by that, they are people who are quite focused and driven. They tend to have a very high expectation of themselves. People pleasers, don't want to let anyone down, highly sensitive on some level. So that can be sort of to noise or light, or it can be to your surroundings, other people. And you kind of have that sort of personality disposition. They've quite often got a high sensitivity gene. And then you add on a layer of maybe some adverse childhood experiences, or bereavement or loss or divorce, or being married to the wrong person, living in the wrong environment. All of those things create more and more layers of stress. And we end up, and we do live in a stressful world. All of us live in a stressful world.
Oh, yeah, so true. And there's a lot of stimulation from everywhere. Obviously, we all have a different environmental need. And, a lot of my work in the kind of environmental psychology aspect of looking at human-made environments is how we all have differing levels of, stressor management for things like ventilation, lighting, acoustics, and just, again, how our energies are balanced around the people that we spend time with, and how we build our environments. And, naturally, as human beings, we spent years and years evolving in natural environments, and we spent a tiny little sliver in these places that we've designed to work in, to live in, to sleep in. And there's a real beauty when you actually look and take a step back to think about designing a space that's, beneficial, regenerative to you. And obviously, when we do that, we start to become more aware of what's affecting us. But we do, especially in the digital world that we live in, with the devices that we have, with the lack of boundaries that it's easy to fall into, and how a lot of these things are designed to keep us compulsively using them and to keep us spending time utilizing certain tools and platforms. And when you combine that with people who are motivated, people who are, looking to push on, people who are looking to achieve, it can ultimately lead to like an onion of stress.
Absolutely.
Until you get crispy on the outside and things start to fall apart a little bit. But like we said, and we spoke about a number of times, so just want to kind of put that message out there for leaders, for business owners, that the people who are constantly achieving in your organization, those who consistently overperform, those who are competitive, those who, every performance review or check-in that they have, everything seems to be on the rails all the time, are probably the most likely people to suffer from this at some point, simply because no one's actually asking them, is this pace okay? And are they aware of everything that's gradually building up? And it's easy as owners to, dip into those who, are struggling, who are visibly, going through challenges and are open enough and vulnerable enough to speak about that. But it's always worthwhile looking at our whole workforce, and that very kind of top 10%. and actually finding and digging a little bit deeper into how they actually are, beyond the fact that they are hitting those targets, hitting those numbers, consistently performing. So what would you suggest that people, look out for, business leaders, again, entrepreneurs? What should we be looking out for? What should we be becoming more aware of?
I would say, in terms of looking at kind of your people who are working for you, that it is very much those super achievers, the ones who will reply to an email at 10 o'clock at night, the ones who aren't switching off, who seem to have very often no boundaries, because the desire to please, the desire to achieve, to get things done, means that the boundaries just disappear. The ones who are happy to work at the weekends, sacrificing Sundays with the family or whatever it might be. Very often there are a number of coping mechanisms which can be conscious or kind of unconscious, but they keep that facade going. So sometimes people will use the whole weekend just to completely detach, recharge, screen phone calls, even from friends, because they haven't got the energy to talk to people, and then they spend the whole weekend sleeping, ready to get back on the treadmill on Monday. And or it might be loading with caffeine. We were talking about coffees earlier, but you're loading up with caffeine. I once treated a guy who had 13 cups of coffee a day just to get through his day, and I was like, I think you might need to have a little look at your health here. Coffee, caffeine drinks, all of those things, stimulants, downing bottles of wine every night just to numb out and help relax. All of those things are surreptitious coping mechanisms that create that disconnection and actually just fatigue the body even more. And eventually the body will give lots of nudges. The body will give you lots of warning signs. The people who go on holiday and fall ill the minute they go on holiday and switch off, that's a big old warning sign.
Oh yeah, it's definitely when those cortisol levels finally start to subside and your body's like, okay, opportunity lies here. Oh yeah, you're not feeling very well. And I think, again, it's not easy, because these people are generally very good at masking. And that's part of that continuous skill set of really pushing forward, of not actually listening to those nudges. And another thing that kind of comes to mind as well, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that these people actually quite often tend to be quite perfectionistic.
Totally.
They love to get things right, and they almost close that space where the floor becomes the ceiling, because everything has to be perfect. And they beat themselves up badly when they make a mistake, and they tend to, fall into patterns of negative self-talk, which propels them even more to prove that they can reach this, what is an unachievable standard, because we can become optimal, but we'll never be perfect. No. And I think that, that again is something that you should look out for, those who are really kind of pushing those boundaries, because like previous guests have alluded to, when you need to sleep the whole weekend just to recover and everything starts to creep in around it, you never actually are able to fully recharge your battery, because you're burning it too much, like using a phone that's plugged in during the week. And we all know that, mobile phones are great. They're also not great. But if there's one thing, if you continue and use it and hammer it, battery's only got a few years. And human beings are balls of energy as well, and we're not that much different.
No, completely.
No.
And the body will eventually, the body will just go, stop. And very often there is a tipping point, and that, I think, this is why we're seeing so many people who've got long COVID, because a virus is very often a tipping point. Quite often people will say, I got glandular fever on the 12th of December 1999, and that was it. It wasn't. That was the tipping point. It was the run up beforehand. And with all my clients, when we start looking at kind of what's going on before, it is all of that self-imposed pressure, the perfectionism. There's some, I say trauma. Trauma, we can have capital T or little T trauma, and if you're a highly sensitive child and you've been told off by a teacher a couple of times in front of a class, that can be trauma in your personal system.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, again, all those things tend to layer up. And even people who experience micro traumas through the roles, again, things tend to build up over time. And like anything with health, it compounds either positively if we start to, make small changes to look after ourselves, or negatively if we start to make little decisions that actually take away small chunks of our health. And unfortunately, like if we decide to, eat poorly for a week, we don't suddenly, put 7 stone on. But if we continue to make those poor choices over time, that is the potential of what can happen. And it's very easy to not take things seriously because it has to compound for so long. But there is always a point where we are forced to really look and reflect. And again, like, previous people we've had on the show, we've had one person who collapsed, and that was her point. We've had someone who ended up sitting on their stairway after a week at work and wasn't able to actually physically get back up. And all these points are, times when actually it's literally the universe is telling us to reflect. Just stop and reflect. And when we're kind of looking and starting to think about some issues around the past year, our immune systems have become a lot more precious to us because we are just well aware of how when there's a global pandemic and there's a potential of something that can end our lives, just how we start to look after and treat ourselves. And while we're not going to go off today on to talk about viral load and, raising and lowering of immunity, there's absolutely no doubt that if we don't look after ourselves, the reality is we leave ourselves more exposed to health conditions. So what I actually want to look at now, Sue, is you've been helping a lot of people with long COVID. So can you tell us and explain for people who obviously have not experienced that, longer term aspects after the virus? Can you start to, unpack that and help people understand what it feels like, how it manifests itself, and what it's like for your clients?
Yeah, so when we talk about fatigue, it's not just feeling tired.
Yeah.
It's, we all have tired days, we will have tired moments. It's not about feeling tired. It's a debilitating fatigue where you might have to weigh up coming downstairs to get a drink with, have I got enough energy to actually eat my dinner?
Yeah.
It's something that has to be it actually becomes all consuming.
Yeah.
Which in itself is exhausting. So there's this very fine balance between managing your energy and allowing that sort of constant analysis of what you can do. So yes, so fatigue can be debilitating.
Yeah.
It can also contribute to multiple symptoms. So things like brain fog, where you just can't think clearly. Sensitivity, so sensitivity to light, to sound, your senses become much more on high alert. I know people that have literally lost their sight for a few weeks at a time through fatigue issues. My son still has a lot of light sensitivity. Can't read emails, things like that. There's just, and it restricts a lot of your life. Can be physical pain. Sometimes people get physical pain, and very often that's linked to trauma being stuck in the body, emotions being stuck in the body. If we don't process our emotions and feelings, they will just come out as pain ultimately, because the body's great. The body's amazing.
Massive feedback loop.
It is. When we learn to really listen to our body and work with it and support it on every level, it's an incredible piece of, I don't know, what do you call it? Engineering, creativity. It's just, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's like it's a supercomputer beyond anything that we could ever create ourselves.
Yeah.
And again, the beauty is, and like we've said before, starting to learn about these things from a lot of different aspects and a lot of different modalities helps you to see how interconnected things are. And I like to actually say, in my workplace wellbeing stuff, when we're designing a wellbeing strategy for an organization, well, wellbeing sits in the middle of so many different aspects, whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, whether it's organizational culture, whether it's psychological safety, whether it's performance, whether it's, business processes, role clarity, workload. It just sits in there and impacts so many different aspects. But ultimately, every person who's part of an organization is a human being. And that is something that we should never lose sight of. So what I want to do, Sue, is, your knowledge is vast on this area, but I really want to just get some nuggets of wisdom about, for those leaders and entrepreneurs who are very type A, who are focused, who are constantly pushing for progress, who are willing to, sometimes not put boundaries in place to manage their energy. What advice would you give to them?
Please listen to your body. Just know that if you don't take stock and address things, we all think we're invincible. We all think we're infallible, that we can just keep pushing and pushing because nothing's happened so far. So therefore I can just carry on the way that I have. But your body will make you stop if it needs to. So bringing in really simple things. So boundaries, really strong. And it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
It's really okay to say no to people. And learning to respect your own time, your own boundaries, what feels right, tuning into actually what feels good for you.
Yeah. What regenerates.
Yeah. If you're in a job that's actually sapping your soul, your body's going to let you know sooner or later. But building in times to properly relax and switch off, and that doesn't mean switching off with your phone scrolling through Facebook. That means taking up something like meditation. Meditation's amazing, and it's not, for anyone who's new to meditation, it's not about sitting on the floor cross-legged chanting Om. You can just follow some nice guided meditations. You can just do simple breathing exercises. When we're stressed, we forget to breathe properly, and we breathe from the top of our lungs, and that actually creates more stress in the body's response system. So deep breathing, alternate nostril breathing, getting out in nature, doing things that make you happy.
Yeah. Bit of celebration.
Yeah, have a bit of fun.
Yeah, and just a bit of joy in your life. And one of the things that I always like to just bring into it is, so your business, right, has a board. Yeah, has a board to help guide it. You have strategy meetings where you check in and see the parts of your business. Is everything working? Why don't you just have a board for your own health and a little strategy meeting with yourself, just to ensure that you're looking after yourself? And those simple concepts that we just take for granted in business, can use them on ourselves. Everything works really well when we have a bit of an annual review of how our health is, how we have little meetings and check-ins with ourselves, how we put a little bit of time in the diary to, have a meeting with the ultimate boss, which is our health and our brain. And just have a little board, find people who can help guide you, who can give you the encouragement to ensure that you're looking after yourself and taking that time, and help you to be accountable to those boundaries that you set, and ensure that you're prioritizing your well-being, because it does compound, and it's amazing what it can do for you when you decide to look to find ways to compound it upwards. So as we come towards the end of the show, some great advice, Sue, and it's been a real pleasure to have you on. But can you tell us what's coming in the future and where people can find out more about the work you do?
Yes, so you can find me at suwinsbury.com. That's Sue without an E. I am currently just about to rerun a program called Leading with Love, which is about leadership, but leading from the heart. And when I say that, this is not about fluffy leadership. This is actually about leading with ourselves first. So the ultimate self-care, boundaries, responsibility, and leading with passion. So that will be coming up in June. And my chronic fatigue recovery support is ongoing. So if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to talk to them about it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely super. And me and Sue are right on that same page. Love is the secret ingredient in leadership, both loving yourself, leading yourself first and being an example, being present with your people, and ultimately loving what you do and the people that you do it with. And I think that's an absolutely amazing way to end the show. So thank you, Sue, for joining me today. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. And we'll be back tomorrow with the amazing Keith Abraham, who we're going to be talking about business, about resilience, true resilience, and how we can start to look at the medical system in a slightly different way. So tune in tomorrow at 12:30. And once again, thank you, Sue, for joining me.
Thank you, Lee.